It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Smoky Mountain Organics, Volquest.com podcast with Austin Price and Rob Lewis. I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us. Be sure and check out Smoky Mountain Organics online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com or visit one of their 4 locations, including their Knoxville store, which is across from Trader Joe's on Kingston Pike at 8018. If you're visiting them in the store, mention Volquest, you get a 15% off discount off your total purchase. If it's an in-store purchase, you can also purchase online as well. That's Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store. All right, guys, plenty to get to as Tennessee gets back to action this week to take on the Kentucky Wildcats after an open date. Let's just start with the Wildcats. Rob Lewis, what do we make of that deal Saturday night in Starkville, and what do we make of Kentucky right now?
I don't think Kentucky's very good. I'm not thought this all year. Kentucky's entire reputation as a good football team is based on them beating Florida on a night when everything went right for them. They blocked the kick. Florida had, a gajillion penalties. And newsflash, Florida's not that good either. Every person in America that thinks Kentucky's a good football team bases it off that. They've beaten South Carolina 16-10. They beat Missouri 35-28. They needed a pick 6 to beat UT Chattanooga by 5 in Lexington. I don't think Kentucky's very good. I think Tennessee wins. I'm not sure it's close.
I'm going to agree with Rob. I just think they're not very good. I've said that for several weeks as well. Again, they're really good in spots, Brent. He's improved that roster immensely in certain areas, but their problems are still their problems, and their problems are on offense. To me, they are super one-dimensional. They love to throw it to the same kid over and over and over again, which hey, listen, man, if you got Calvin Johnson, that's great. He's no Calvin Johnson. So I just think that they are a really solid football team that's super one-dimensional, that has benefited from the fact they play a weak schedule. They did beat Florida, which Tennessee can't do. Let's put that out there. But they took advantage of the fact that LSU's in shambles. And then again, he's 3-6. He's 2-6 against the Vols. He's 3-6 against Mississippi State since he got to Lexington. Again, as you were told about a month or so ago, Hubs, that Kentucky job is a really good job because why? They don't schedule anybody in the out of conference. So they got 4 ready-made wins. So then all you got to beat Vanderbilt and South Carolina and Missouri, 2 of those 3 to get to a bowl game. And then they've started to kind of climb in and approach Tennessee, but they're still only 3-7 against the Vols in Tennessee's worst decade ever. And, they don't have anybody from the West that's really good. I mean, they're 3-6 against the Mississippi State program they play every year. The Vols would walk to Tuscaloosa and back to never have to play them again and play Mississippi State every year. I'm with Rob. I
think they're pretty good up front on the defensive line. I think they're hard to move. I think that's a challenge for Tennessee this week. And I think they'll test Tennessee's patience on offense this week, Rob. I think that plays what Kentucky does defensively plays into Mississippi State's hands favorably because they want to keep the ball in front of them, and Mike Leach wants to throw everything underneath them. I guess my question is, I think they're better than what they played against Mississippi State.
Sure, I'll give them that, but I mean, it's still. I mean, that doesn't. Were they better than they're beating South Carolina 16-10? Are they better than beating? I mean, Missouri. I think we could all agree Missouri is pitiful.
Rob, your point is the fact that somebody had sat there and had them in one of the first 2 teams out of the college football playoff, which is a joke. I mean, if they're in the top 6, then I could name 100 different things that I didn't do for the last 2 months.
They're good in the front 7.
Yes, they are very good in the front 7. Secondary is weak though,
and their offense is terrible. I mean, the only 2 teams in the SEC that have worst offenses as far as scoring are South Carolina and Vanderbilt. I mean, Kentucky's averaging under 30 points a game, even with a horrid non-conference schedule where they should have been able to pad some of those stats. The only people, I mean, they hit total yardage wise. Again, South Carolina and Vandy, the only people that pick up less per game. I just think, I don't think they're going to be able to keep Tennessee under 30, and I think Kentucky has no chance of getting 30.
All the more important, Brent, that Cade Mays plays, because to your point, how they do stay with Tennessee is getting to Hendon Hooker, getting sacks, and then not allowing Tennessee to run the ball. So if Tennessee has a more healthy offensive line than they've had in some time, which goes to your point, that is going to allow Tennessee to have more success. If something happened and Cade has a setback and can't go, and they've got to get that hodgepodge, offensive line, it becomes way more difficult against the Kentucky front seven that is really good.
Yeah, and just Tennessee's got to find a way to run the football to some degree to keep a team honest. Mississippi State had more success running the football than anybody thought that they would have. I think it's interesting. A lot of people in Lexington are trying to figure out what's going on. There's talk about there's some potential issues going on behind the scenes in the locker room. They got some injuries. They got some parents out there squawking pretty loud allegedly, and some different things like that. Kind of makes you wonder where Kentucky is. I was surprised by that performance by Kentucky on Saturday night, coming off a bye week. You would think that would be a really rejuvenated, really fresh football team. It wasn't, which makes you wonder where's Tennessee coming off the bye week, because teams have not been great coming off bye weeks this year. Well,
to your point, you would have really thought they would have taken the 10-0 start, the punt return for a touchdown,
right?
And the juice they got from that, and used that as the springboard to get into the game. And then next thing you know, it's 31-10.
Well, and they
31 unanswered by Mississippi State.
They turned the football over a bunch. That's their biggest bugaboo, whatever, all year long, Rob. When you look at it, they don't force turnovers, and they've turned it over a bunch. And a fact that their records where it's at tells you a lot about the schedule they played, to your point, Rob, because not many teams in the country can have that kind of turnover margin, that kind of turnover ratio, and be, and still be where they're at in terms of bowl eligible and everything else, because they have won games where they've turned it over a bunch because they haven't been playing great opponents. Can Tennessee force those turnovers? Because that's been their biggest issue all year long.
Oh, it's remarkable, Hubbard. I'm pretty sure this is right. I think they've only forced 4 turnovers all season long, and have had 16 themselves. As bad as they are on offense, that's impossible to overcome. It's more surprising that their record is as good as it is.
Well, and I think that goes to your point about the schedule.
And again, if Florida doesn't have a gajillion penalties in that game, and how many cracks did they have inside the 10-yard line?
A dozen or so
on that last drive. If Florida wins that game, Kentucky's sitting at 5-3, and nobody, thinks that they're any good. Which, to me, they're not. And I may look ignorant Saturday night, but that's a fascinating point about the turnovers. I just looked at that today, and to have only, when you allegedly are a defensive, football team that takes care of the football and plays smart and fundamentally sound, to be minus 12 on the year there. There's not even close in the league.
No, I think Kentucky is the only team in the country with a winning record when you're double digit minus, in the turnover margin with where they are.
So they have if they're minus 12, how many games have they played? 8? What is that? That's like minus. I'm not great at math, but I think that's minus 1.5 per game, which is that's rough.
Yep, it's tough.
I'll go ahead and spoil the picks for Friday. I'm with Rob. I'm taking Tennessee. I just ultimately think that, much like Tennessee's kind of got this hang up when they see the Gator logo on the side of a helmet in September, they get rejuvenated. And I'm not saying Kentucky has a hang up with Tennessee. I just think Tennessee goes into this game and says, it's Kentucky. We beat these guys. Traditionally, we beat these guys. And they play a certain way, much like when Florida walks into the game against Tennessee, they go, it's Tennessee. We won 16-17. We beat these guys. And they play above their heads. And then, the next week lose to Kentucky, and then, lose more and lose more. So, I just think it's one of those type games where the kids go in knowing how a history of a series has went, and they play a certain way.
But and they may. We'll see. I think that I'm
Rob and I are all in. Hubs is Debbie Downer, bro.
No,
listen to this.
I'm just wondering where Kentucky is. Where's their, are they all about basketball? I mean, is it kind of over up there in terms of their focus?
No, they'll get up for this game because they want to beat Tennessee. Their fans will be into this game.
Yeah, and Tennessee Kentucky's played their best football at home, with the exception of UT Chattanooga, which they barely beat, as Rob pointed out. I think Kentucky shows. I think Tennessee should outscore Kentucky, and I think Kentucky has a hard time keeping pace there. I just think Kentucky will play a lot better than what they played Saturday night.
Oh, I agree with this. Kentucky can beat Tennessee. I just think the mindset of Tennessee going in will be what I just said. I think Kentucky can't score enough. So unless Tennessee were to pull a Kentucky and give them the turnover edge, then I just don't think that Tennessee will lose this football game unless they lose the turnover battle.
Rob, how big of a deal is it that Tyon Evans is going to be right at, we think is going to be right at 100%? Is that bigger than Cade Mays? Is that the biggest injury update for Tennessee if Tyon Evans is closer to what we saw pre-ankle injury?
I kind of almost think it's Cade just because
I think they work together hand in hand.
Yeah, they're both big, but I just think, Jabari is. I think Tyon is pretty clearly better, but I think there's a bigger drop off from what you're having to play when Cade's out, and in addition to having, to shuffle, play guys, maybe play guys out of position. I just think the drop off from Cade to his replacement is bigger than the drop off from Tyon to his replacement.
And Austin, you feel pretty good Cade's going to give it a go?
Yeah, I just feel like he knows that he's got a month left to play with his brother. I think I think he's pretty much 100% anyways. But if he wasn't, I think he was going to try to gut through it. Kid's pretty tough, a lot tougher than people, think. I think he's going to gut through it regardless. But I think he's pretty close to 100%. I don't think he's quite 100, but I think it's 90ish. So I think he'll go. Yeah.
So we'll see what Tennessee looks like come Saturday.
Barring a setback, their ankles.
Well, we'll see what Tennessee looks like after a week's worth of practice, and what they look like on what it looks like Saturday night, and how Tennessee fares and goes from there against, again, a Kentucky team that has not been very good offensively and has found ways to win against some teams that haven't been very good. They've not been in a lot of track meets. The only track meet they were in was with Missouri, and that's a Missouri team that doesn't look like they can get on the track right now in any way, shape, or form. So we'll have plenty more football coverage coming up throughout the remainder of the week to get you ready for Tennessee and Kentucky. Several other things to get to in this podcast. We'll start with hoops. Got a little exhibition game this past Saturday, Rob. It's Lenore-Ryan. Maybe you don't put a whole lot of stock in it. Maybe you do. Lots of points going on. Looks like you got a potential identity for this basketball team. Not a lot of 15-foot jumpers, dunks, and three-point shots. Is that the makeup of this basketball team?
Yeah, I think that's I will still need to see that style a little bit more when the games actually count. But as Rick said the other day that they've had two full blown inter squad scrimmages where they kept score and had timeouts, halftime, all that kind of thing. They had the scrimmage against Davidson. They had the exhibition on Saturday. All four of those instances, they put up more than 43 pointers in the game. So, I think they are going to play that way. That's kind of my biggest takeaway from it. I wish Fulkerson would have played. Not that it would have changed my perception, but you just get more of a sense for what they look like at full strength. And what Fulkerson playing would have saw from me, or maybe not saw, but hinted at, was whether or not Uros really has, a defined role in this team, is he just playing Fulkerson's minutes? And how many guys is Rick going to play? I'll still be surprised if it's more than 7, maybe 8 guys are really firmly in the rotation. And newsflash, Kennedy Chandler is pretty good.
That's where I was going next. We knew that Kennedy Chandler could play, and I know it's an exhibition game, but Rob, going to be really hard to keep him off the floor. In terms of, no offense to Muscovy, and maybe he plays some play off the ball, but it's hard for me not to look at this team and say they're not going to be at their best when Kennedy Chandler's on the floor. To me, to be at their best, he's going to be the engine that makes them go. Maybe that's not fair to make that assertion through one game, through one exhibition game, But that's certainly what it felt like to me on Saturday.
Yeah, but it's not for me. It's not just one exhibition game, and I've seen him in practice, and he's the best player in the gym, pretty much every day. When they split up and go 5-on-5, it's very rare when Kennedy's team does not come out on top. So, and again, I'm not placing it all on Lord Ryan because he looked like a Harlem Globetrotter, for a lot of times on Saturday. I mean, just doing whatever he wanted. I mean, the kid hit 7 of 8 shots, was 4 or 5 from 3. I think he had 6 assists, maybe either 6 or 7 assists, 5 rebounds, and just 1 turnover. And I mean, he's special. There's no doubt about that. I wish I had my SEC ballot back, my preseason ballot back, because I did not vote Kennedy on the preseason first team All SEC team. I would now.
Look, Huntley Hatfield. Watching him in practice, I kind of was like, he puts up big numbers in the exhibition game. Not that he's not talented; he's obviously talented, but felt like he was a ways to go. Is that, of all the things that happened on Saturday, is that the one that's the biggest pump your brakes type deal because of who they were playing against? Or do you think this is a guy who is learning how to practice but knows how to play?
No, I pump the brakes. I mean, he's an NBA talent, no question. I mean, I don't know if it's this year or whatever, but he's an NBA player. But I've seen that from him before in practice. But then, like the next day, the next time you go in, he didn't make a shot. So he's not nearly as consistent as Kennedy right now, and long term, his potential is off the charts. But he is not ready right now to put those kind of performances together. Back to back to back. In my opinion, I could. He may prove me wrong. I mean, and it's not about talent. I mean, he's just young, and he's a freshman that way, but he is prodigiously talented. I mean, he may end up being one and done, even if he doesn't start or average double digits, just because NBA guys will see that potential.
All right, let's take Kennedy Chandler out of the equation. Biggest surprise to you from Saturday, and what concerns you about this team? Not necessarily based on Saturday, but based on the preseason so far.
And I thought Uroš looked pretty good. I mean, I thought he looked noticeably quicker, more nimble, more agile. Now, he's still going to be, challenged a lot of nights to stay in front of guys in this league. But I thought he looked much different physically in terms of just quickness. He looks a little leaner. And
doesn't he have to have a role on this team? I mean, when you look at them in the post, trying to figure out sort of where they are with potential foul trouble and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, if
don't you think he's a guy, not necessarily in the regular rotation, but he's the first guy readily available if the rotation gets off a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's 7'1". I mean, it's a cliche. Right. You can't coach that. And we're going to get the concerns. My biggest concern would be rebounding. I think, Olivier, I like Olivier, but he's never been in this role before where he's going to be a starter playing, right now, 20 plus minutes a game. Fulkerson, everybody loves John Fulkerson, not a great rebounder. I mean, he could get shoved off his spots. He can kind of get bullied down there by a lot of guys. Has never, he can do a lot of things to help you win, a lot of things at a high level, but rebounding is not his strength. So to me, that's my biggest concern. And one reason I think Uroš has to have a role, even if it's a small, even if it's 10, 12 minutes a game. And you got to be able to use size like that. And especially a dude has missed your other 7-footer has missed essentially 3 weeks of practice. If he's going to get –
and has been injury prone.
And that to me feels like a guy that Rick's going to leave behind. I could be wrong about that. Maybe Jonas is able to play his way back into the rotation. But, Rick's like one of those college professors. You miss the first 2 or 3 days of class, and he's not spending any time to catch you back up.
Yeah, and I know post defense has been and rebounding is always a concern, but post defense has been a huge point of emphasis for the last few weeks or the last week and a half or so. And so to figure that out and to get whoever, I mean, if Uroš will play some defense and rebound the basketball, he'll play a lot of minutes. If that's the only thing he worries about is keeping somebody in front of him on the defensive end of the floor and rebounding the basketball, he's going to have a niche for some quality minutes for this team because I just, as you mentioned, they don't have a lot of guys who have proven their ability to do that. So we'll see how this team develops. Certainly a fast start and and one that got some fans who were there in attendance interested, and a team that's going to get better. And again, I mean, I think Kennedy Chandler did nothing to show anybody other than what we already knew, and that's he's a really good basketball player. While the basketball team was playing Austin, Tennessee was on the road recruiting everywhere on the football front. A lot of junior college buzz. Tennessee offers a DB on Monday from Kilgore Community College in Texas. Rodney Garner offers a defensive tackle from Independence Community College in Kansas. Are you surprised at some of the JUCO work that Tennessee is getting done? I knew they go evaluate some guys. Are you surprised at kind of the movement and the JUCO world coming out of this weekend?
No, that they've been really kind of scouring the JUCO ranks for quite some time. You go back about 6 weeks ago, they offered, was it 3 or 4 defensive backs? That was part of that kind of like 2 or 3 day span where they offered Zoff, Frazier, and there's several of those kids over in Kansas. So no, I mean, I'm not. Trey Johnson works on the defensive side in the recruiting office. I mean, he's constantly scouring the JUCO ranks. They have guys on the staff that have ties to the JUCO ranks. And so, when you get out there and you make an emphasis to go see some of those kids, you're inevitably going to get there and go, that's a good looking kid. What's his story? And then you find a little more, and then you start watching a little more tape, and you go, well, this might be a find, and then you offer. So no, I'm not surprised at all that they've kind of dipped into the JUCO ranks. They got to take multiple defensive backs in this class. Guys in the secondary, you're probably looking at 5 guys between now and the end of the signing class. They got to take some defensive linemen. So, they're going to keep recruiting the Cody Joneses and the Walter Nolans of the world, but, there's not a whole lot of names out there in the high school ranks.
Josh Heupel says that they were received really well across the state of Tennessee. Is there a noticeable difference in terms of reaction to Tennessee across the state based on the fact this team's 4-4 and they put up some offensive numbers and they've got a sense of an identity on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the tide has turned, across the state of Tennessee. So I mean, there's just more juice there. There's more juice overall. I mean, it's what happens when you can be competitive, show an exciting brand of football to play, and kind of take a step in the right direction when it comes to showing on the field tangible proof to these kids. I mean, if you think about it, the first 3 months, kids couldn't come on campus. He had nothing to show. So there was not much juice. They got a couple of commitments here and there. Started out with Elijah Herring. Then it kind of picked up a little bit more. Taven Jackson committed. Then all of a sudden the dead period lifted. But still at that point, you could not show tangible proof of on the field product. You could talk about what you've done at UCF, what you've done at other stops as coordinators and so on and so forth. But it was a long time between when Josh Heupel got here and that first game, with all the cloud hanging over and all that other stuff going on. It seemed like a lot longer than normal when Tennessee's had these changes. And so to finally get to that point, they've been able to, again, have an exciting brand of football on offense, score some points. They've been competitive against teams that most people, haven't seen them be competitive against in a while. And, thus I think they do have kind of a, they've kind of turned the corner a little bit, with some of this stuff.
Is it a bigger deal for the defense that there's something on paper or on tape, or is it a bigger deal for the offense?
Both.
I mean, because I think offensively everybody knew what Josh Heupel was all about, right? That's easier to sell to recruits. This is what we do. Go back and look at the last 4 or 5 years. Tim Banks going, I don't have anything for you to see. Talk to me in October. Fair?
Well, I still think it's both, though. I mean, you heard Josh Heupel talk about it last week, when I asked that exact question about being able to show something. And, he talked about, when we talked to kids or met with kids once the dead period lifted, well, all you could really say was, well, here's what we did at these other schools. Like, it's different, though, when you can say, hey, here's what we're doing now, here and now, in the present. So no, I think it's both. I mean, yes, you're right. I think that you bring up a great point. Tim Banks was this great unknown coming into the season, and what he's gotten out of this group of defense that had given up limitless points and yards for the last several years has been impressive. But I think it's still overall, it's the whole kit and caboodle, not just one side of the ball or the other.
Should be interesting to see what happens. Everybody watched a good bit of college football over the weekend. What was y'all's take? from not having to cover a Tennessee game and sort of watching some college ball? Did you take away anything from the weekend? I'll tell you what I took away. For the first time in a long time, to me, there's nobody who's running and saying, "Give me the Heisman Trophy." That's the first thing. Maybe that's a meaningless award or doesn't carry as much water, but it doesn't feel like that there's a handful of really great players in college football this year, as we've seen in past years.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but I think that goes back to the team aspect as well. I mean, I think Alabama's good and but beatable. Hence why they lost to Texas A&M on the road. Georgia, I think's out of this world defensively, but I still think their offense is suspect. And the way he handles the quarterback situation from here on out, and it sure looks like it's going to be Stetson Bennett, could be a real problem, the rest of the way. I just, at some point, they're going to have a bad game offensively. And then do you turn back to the guy that you've kind of turned your back on, or do you stick with Stetson Bennett through a tough half in a close game? Their offense to me doesn't just scream national titles. Now, again, their defense does. And there have been plenty of times in the past where you could just be really good on defense and marginal on offense and get the job done. But in today's modern world of scoring points, if they run up against a team that beats them a couple of times deep on a couple of plays and score some points on them, I think they could be in trouble. But I still go back to, I just think there's parity across the board, all across college football. And I think that means there's less star players, to your point, and more just really good players.
A couple of things. Nick Saban's not losing to Stetson in Atlanta. I don't think. And I don't think Alabama's all that great. I just think Georgia's offense can't get done. And to AP's point, I mean, look at the NFL draft. I mean, is there a quarterback that's a for sure first-round draft pick this year? I mean, maybe I don't know. I mean, there probably will, but teams are so desperate. They might talk themselves into one, but they're sure not going to be, 5 taken in the top 15 like they were last year?
No, I mean, I think Kenny Pickett's is the best NFL prospect in college football right now.
I think that's possible. And I'll tell you another thing this week. This is earth shattering, and we all watch a lot of SEC football, but we don't get to watch as much as we did this past week. I don't think. I mean, call me crazy. I don't think Tennessee's far from being the third best team in this conference. I mean, they're light years from Georgia and Alabama. I don't want to. But outside of that, I mean, would LSU be a dumpster fire? With Jimbo not really being able to get a lot of traction at Texas A&M. I mean, Ole Miss went into this weekend, ranked number 8 in the country. And we all saw, couple calls or a couple plays 2 weeks ago. Tennessee beats them. Yeah. I mean, I think you got Bama in Georgia, and I think
then a huge group of teams fighting it out for 3 through 7. Yes.
Yeah, I think they're coming up. I tell you what, I think the guy at Auburn's done a pretty good job. Now, I don't know what's going to happen to him at the end of the month. And all the mandates down there with everything off the field and vaccinations and all that. And that's for a different podcast.
Good Lord.
On the field, that guy's done a pretty good job. Now, he's got Bo Nix. Bo Nix is helping him out because right now you got good Bo, whereas you had bad Bo against Georgia State, but you've had good Bo Nix the last few weeks. And, he's done a pretty good job down there, much to my surprise. All right, my last thing, and I'm out the gate here on this podcast. Austin, do you remember, and Rob, do you remember Kenneth Walker III when he was playing high school football in Memphis?
I do.
I don't remember anything about him.
He again, though, just didn't have a ton of traction. Again, look at a guy like Shannon Blair at Knox West, going to the same school, doesn't have a lot of traction out there in recruiting, but ends up going to a Power 5 school, develops, and we'll see if Shannon's able to do that when he's coming off the knee injury. But I mean, there's several of those kids, around college football, that are from this place or that place. This one just happens to be from Memphis. So
well, I mean, that happens. That happens a lot. But if you'd have asked me middle of that game where that guy's from, there is no way in hell I could have told you he was from Memphis.
Oh yeah, I knew he was. Yeah, I mean,
I don't remember him. I don't remember.
It's one of those things where he was good, not great. Question the speed, and thus they never really acted on it because they felt like he wasn't fast enough for this league.
There you go. I didn't remember him, so I figured you would, but I didn't remember a whole lot about him. Like I said, I didn't realize he was from Memphis until
certainly playing well.
Yes, certainly playing well, and Michigan State getting a huge win over the Wolverines to stay unbeaten. Mel Tucker got to be right there for your National Coach of the Year honors for what he's done in a short period of time, and East Lansing as well. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Smoky Mountain Organics Volquest.com podcast. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.